Hey everyone, Max Emmer from Emmer Law, and I'm here with esteemed colleague and clinical therapist Brett Sherman, whose practice is in Birmingham, Michigan. I work with Brett regularly on a host of divorce and mental health matters, and I wanted to bring her on to ask a few questions that I think would help educate the community at large. So Brett, first of all, welcome.
Hi Max, happy to be here.
Thank you. And I want to ask you, and in full disclosure, we've worked on a number of matters together. We're both certified collaborative divorce professionals, and Brett also has a thriving private clinical practice. And since you deal with divorce so often, I want to ask you, with your patients or with prospective clients or just anyone out there listening, how should people discuss divorce with their children? And what steps should they take to make a really hard situation even just a little better?
I think these are really important questions, and when you sent these over to me, I thought about this, and I want to break it down into three kind of tiers. And I think the first is before talking to your kids about divorce, and if and when I can kind of get my hands on a family before they've talked to their kids about divorce, I like to ask families in terms of a framework, what, if any, difficult news have they shared with their kids before, right? So have they ever shared challenging news? And why do I ask this question? I think it's really important preparatory step to say, how have your kids reacted, right?
Right.
What did they say? How did they behave after you shared such difficult news? Because this can kind of help us to figure out how they're going to react again, not necessarily in the exact same way, but we can anticipate what their reactions may be and help us prepare with strategies before this new information is shared again, right? This is a difficult conversation we're kind of preparing for, and it's one that holds a lot of weight. It's one that lays the groundwork for a healthy new start for the family. So we really want to think about this conversation beforehand, prepare beforehand, and think about what would be most helpful for the kids before kind of talking to them.
Okay, so that's what we do before. Okay.
Yeah, so that's kind of my first beforehand, right? Anticipating reactions, coming up with a strategy to handle what might be best for the kids before ever even thinking about talking to them. Now, I don't always get to talk to families before they've already shared the news because we're really always kind of jumping in quickly to talk to kids.
Sure, we're doing triage versus planning.
Yeah. Often I'm getting my hands in when the crisis already happened, right? So that's okay. But that's kind of step one. Step two being this actual conversation, right? So how can we help talking to kids if you've already done it or if you're about to have this conversation? And the easiest way I like to walk parents through the conversation is by describing this concept of a flashbulb memory. It's a psychological concept where, for those of us who might not have heard the term before, I kind of equate it. It's the same idea of 9/11, right? Where you or I might remember exactly where we were when we heard about that tragedy, right?
Kennedy assassination, certain major events and watershed moments we all remember.
Exact same idea, right? Where these really valid and particularly vivid, long-lasting memories of dramatic events in our life, that's the same concept that our kids are going to remember here. And I'll kind of walk parents through an exercise where I'll say to them, like, how do you want your kids to remember this conversation? And it may come as a surprise that never once has a family said to me they want their kids to remember this conversation as an awful, tragic, kind of hysterical experience, right? So I humor aside there, I think that provides a really steady footing though, and it's a good basis for me to kind of jump in professionally, and I can step in and say, okay, great. So if we're saying to you, you don't want this to be awful, tragic, a hysterical kind of conversation, right? I can give some guidance on how we're going to talk about this differently, and just share this info in a better kind of way with your kids. And that kind of leads me to what we're going to say. We want to avoid flooding kids with information here. And it's kind of contrary to popular belief where we're going to kind of word vomit and say so much about the divorce and give them all the nitty gritty and all of this.
Transparency is one thing, but we can't be too transparent.
Exactly right. Yeah, I think that's really on point there. But regardless of age, young or teens, right? We want to be really straightforward with information, but we also want to just kind of be direct, right? I like to explain to parents, let your kids ask questions and answer what they say, right? So instead of just kind of over talking, let them ask and you answer. be super straightforward, avoid flooding with information, think less is more in terms of this conversation. Also, you know, if nothing else, and parents tend to get nervous, understandably speaking, this is a really intense conversation that we're having. You got to let your kids just know, we love you. That's never changing, and no one's ever replacing you, right? That's a really big concept that I always try to convey to families. That has to come across here. Another big point here, and this is kind of the last one I'll make on the topic, and of course I could go on for days about
Sure,
this.
I'm
but
sure. No, it's great stuff.
I think the most important thing that I think families need to convey to their children when you're having this conversation is that you're a united front. You're on the same team. So we're preparing so much for this conversation. And that's something that I do with parents in these sessions preemptively. But sitting together, right? You've prepared for this. You're together when you tell the news. Some families will say, no, I'm going to tell. And, you know, my soon-to-be ex-husband will tell. And I say, no, right? Both parents together, mom and dad, or mom and mom, dad and dad, sitting together, planning what to say, sharing the news, both together, united front. We're on the same team. We won't be living together anymore, but we will still be parenting together. Providing that reassurance to your children is just key. It's unity, it's same team. We're all still in this together. And I think that kind of goes along with the final point that is just, this is a major adjustment period. There's a new normal that's going to be established here. So anticipating that this may be a challenge will be a challenge for everyone, parents included, right? But especially for your kids. And there's this monumental fear that goes along with divorce that I'm going to be choosing sides, right? That idea of being together in this conversation, same team, kind of eradicates that, right? You won't be choosing sides. We're all in this together. I think that can be really helpful.
Yeah, and I think, and to me, what it sounds like basically is that, one, come to it as oxymoronic as it sounds, with a positive attitude and a positive kind of framework. Two, being intentional about it, not dancing around it, because I think no one does well dancing around issues. Yeah. And, you know, three, being transparent but not flooding. So saying kind of basically, we're not dancing around, this is what's happening, but this doesn't change how we feel about you. This doesn't change how our dynamic is. It's just, you know, our family's going to be evolving, but we're going to do everything in our power to keep things as normal and healthy as possible. And it sounds like that's a good start. Well, Brett, thank you so much. And if anybody would like to work with Brett as a resource, either for private therapy or divorce, I will provide her contact info, or feel free to reach out to me. And Brett, thank you so much, and everyone have a terrific day.